Your neighbor tells you about the unstable man in the cul-de-sac who claims to have been abducted by aliens. And then there's the woman in town who claims to see Bigfoot all the time. Your boss, who you greatly admire, confides in you that he has started speaking with his wife daily when he gets home from work. She died 8 years ago. It's hard to believe this stuff, and you write these stories off as overactive imaginations. Are these people seeking attention, or are they a bit unstable? No matter what you think, if you're like me, you walk away wondering, what if that was true? The What If It's True podcast features stories by ordinary people like you and me. Something has happened to them, something so strange they are in agony unless they tell others. My name is Cameron Buckner, and the What If It's True podcast is available at whatifitstruepodcast.com and on all available podcast apps.
Welcome to Beast TV. What was that? You better get a fresh dip and buckle up. You are not Larry Porst II. Who
What?
are you? Thinking you're going to camouflage behind them sunglasses, Mr.
No, we were late because I was running around trying to tear my sleeves off. I had to tear my sleeves off.
Oh, okay.
I had to get in. I had to get in beast mode.
We want to welcome everybody to tonight's podcast, and co-hosting with me is our good friend Can Squatch. So how you doing tonight, Cans?
I'm doing all right. You know, I'm ready for this hot weather to be over. I'm glad I could step in here and pinch hit for Larry. And you know, I want to hear some stories that I've been kind of hearing alluded to by our guests in the chat. I always get these little bits and pieces about what might be happening, and I got some stories. I'm not comfortable coming on, and so I'm ready. I think a lot of people in chat are probably ready for this.
Yeah, and we want to welcome everyone that comes into the chat room. And if you're new, feel free to jump on in there and talk. Everybody has a good time. It's very friendly, and it's a great place to be at on Thursday nights.
Absolutely. So
tonight,
Mark, how you been doing?
I'm doing good. I've been busy the past few days. I mean, I'm busy. I'm busier than a one-legged man in a kick fight.
Well, that comes with the territory of being a Bigfoot all-star like yourself, right? You're high demand.
Well, we're not going to tell everybody I had to send you some money on PayPal for you to say that.
Right. I just turned around and bought a beast gator. That's all, and some stickers. Stickers from my kayak.
Well, it's a real treat to have friends to be able to come on the podcast. And so, Scott, I'm just going to go ahead and let you introduce our guest tonight.
Oh, well, I got the quick rundown here before the show. Everybody in the chat will know our guests, the Blalack's, and they're going to talk about some encounters they've had out in the Pacific Northwest. So before I screw up any other details in the background, we might as well just bring them on.
Welcome, David
Thank
and
you, Mark.
Dede.
Hi.
Thank you. Welcome. Thank you, Gons.
Welcome to Beast.
Thank you.
We are just thrilled that you are here tonight.
We are
And
too.
it's a pleasure. It really is. I mean, you support our Facebook page, our YouTube channel, and you do so much, and you're such nice people.
Yep.
And that's what we value the most, is people that are good, salt of the earth people. So
And plus, they trust us to come on here and share this with us.
yeah.
It's a comfortable environment. It's a good place, and we've been, most everybody in the chat's been with this show for so long that it gets to be kind of a really good community where people can feel like they can step out when they're comfortable, when the time's ready, kind of share what they need to.
Absolutely.
Yes. And that's why we chose this group too. Is full disclosure, I actually sent my story to Cam at Dixie Cryptid. I think it was in 2019, and he hasn't read it or none on his show, but it was this group, and once we kind of learned you guys and stuff and figured out that you guys are a really good group of people, and it was like, man, I really would like to tell our story there.
Good.
Yeah. Well, we're going to let you do it, but before we get started, I would just like for both of you just to tell us a little bit about yourselves. And so let's just start with you, David.
Okay. Well, I grew up in Northern California, in a little town called Weaverville. We moved from Arcata, where I was born when I was 1, and moved to Weaverville area and lived along Highway 299, around Burt Ranch and Big Bar and Junction City, which is on the same road that goes to Willow Creek, and not far from Willow Creek. And then grew up hunting and fishing with my dad, enjoyed outdoors, camped and hiked and did big wilderness pack-ins to the wilderness for weeks on end. And I was a tree climber for 20 years and kind of done with that, and bodies broke down, but just enjoy life, and we're blessed, and we love what we got. So
Dede, tell us a little bit about yourself. You knew I was going to put you on the spot.
I did. So I'm really excited about the hunting that we've got coming up this next month. We're going to Idaho for a mule deer hunt, rifle season. So we love to hunt, and that's what brings us out to the woods and the encounters we're going to talk about in a little bit. And for myself, I enjoy gardening and hunting, like I just said. We have 2 miniature pinscher dogs that take a lot of our time with everything with them. And then we're talking about some encounters that we had in the area where I grew up and was born and raised in the east side of the Cascades. So it's on the east side of Interstate 5 that runs through Oregon, north and south. And we lived in the mountains on that side of the Cascades. And so had some encounters up there. So we'll talk about those in the future.
Fantastic. I tell you, David, why don't you tell us? Let's just start at the beginning, at the Genesis, and you tell us what your first encounter was.
Okay, so really to start it off, I was just kind of planning on just going back and telling the very first things that I ever remember about the subject, and it was my dad and grandpa and great grandpa, and I think my great great grandpa were all from Arkansas. So I think the first thing I ever heard about was my dad when he would take me and my younger brother deer hunting with him. We were just little kids, that every now and then he would just start telling us a story, just a random one. And one of them was when he was a kid that his great grandpa, which had been my great great grandpa, had took him to a job site, and I believe this happened in Arkansas. I could be wrong, but I think this is in Arkansas, around the Little Rock area. And my great great grandpa was a cat operator and had cut a road into this untouched area and had took my dad early one morning just to show him the job site and what he was doing and stuff. And so they get there, and out of the woods walk these big old huge footprints, bare human looking footprints, but were huge. And they walked around the cat and then walked right back into the woods. And my dad, supposedly there was like a news station or a newspaper that came out there and did a story on it, and it was reported, I guess. We've looked into it and it can't find nothing on it. But that was one of the random stories my dad would talk about. And we were like, well, why would you think someone hoaxed you? And he's like, well, because what else could it be? And so he would refuse to believe it. And then the other story that this happened a little later in life.
What year was that, if you can recall? Did you know? Did he tell you what year that was back when in Arkansas?
He was a little boy, so I'm not sure. Probably, the 50s maybe, or something in there.
Yeah, my grandfather's from Arkansas.
Oh, nice. We're probably related.
Might be on that branch that goes straight.
Our family tree don't branch, right?
Anyway, go ahead. I wanted to check that.
Okay. So anyway, then another story that he would tell us while we were deer hunting, and this would be when I would probably around 14. He ended up telling me and my brother about another incident where he was a cat operator, and this has been in Trinity County, California, big old growth fir country. And there's a wilderness trailhead there now that was probably the road that they used to make that. But he they got done cutting the road right up before dark, and he was helping a friend. My dad was a planerman at the local lumber mill and was kind of out of work at the time. And so he went and helped our friend cut this road. And they get up there the next morning, like 4:30 in the morning, was going to fuel up the cat, and starts getting light. And there's big old footprints coming right out of the big old growth timber, walked around the cat a couple times and walked right back into the timber. And my dad swore up and down that somebody had hoaxed him again and was trying to just shut down the logging, is what his mentality was. And so we were like, Dad, did it look like somebody used a board, or, did it make the track, or how big? And he's like, they just look like big human footprints, and they just walked around the cat and walked back in. And we're like, okay, well, he actually got kind of irritated and would change the subject if we talked about it, just refused to acknowledge that it wasn't a hoax. And so that was kind of what I grew up with starting off. And then the first true encounter that I had wasn't even a sighting. It was just hearing it. We had moved to this place called Junction City, California, and it was a place called Slattery Pond. And there's just an old red dirt road that went way back behind there. And it was the only trailer back in there, and way back in the woods, and kind of on the foothills of the Trinity Alps wilderness. And we'd only lived there a couple months. And when we moved in, the homeowners told us that the previous owners or previous renters had moved out because some big quote bear kept bothering, would come around every now and then and bother them. And so we didn't think nothing about it. I don't think my mom and dad did. So we lived there. And the first things that happened was my brother, who would have been probably 14 or 15, comes running in the house one day, and he had fear on his eyes. And he's like, Mom, Dad, I found these huge footprints. And he goes, they look like human, but they're huge. And my mom goes, oh, it's probably a bear that just stepped into its own tracks. And he was just like, no, Mom, no, I'm telling you, they were huge footprints and they were far apart. And she wrote it off. But all of his kids could read our brother and know that he was telling the truth, and he was scared. And it probably was within weeks of that one night, just these screams started coming off the kind of bluff country behind our trailer. and it sounded like the woman being murdered or torn apart, just screams, and it would echo so loud. My dad's like, it's a bobcat, or it's a mountain lion, or a fox. And my mom had tears run down her eyes, like, Chuck, you got to save her. And he was like, it's not a person, but it was just these screams that were just scary and make you feel like somebody was dying. And that
Was
went
that
on for several nights.
Central California?
That's Northern California,
Okay.
kind of on the western side by Redding. It's kind of northwest of Redding, California.
Okay. And
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 it's
then that
not
was
far from the Patty area as far as the crow flies. It's kind of just
gotcha.
around the mountains.
It's like an
And that was in
hour.
the eight. Was that in the 80s?
This would have been just turned 80, 89, probably 89 into excuse me, 79 into 80.
Okay. Okay.
I was
Ooh.
probably I was probably 8 or 9 years old when this happened.
And you guys have moved out there, and how long had you been out there until when your brother found those tracks?
We'd probably only been there a couple weeks, maybe at
Wow.
the most. And what's funny about this is all the story kind of when I get to the end of it, it kind of makes sense. But the pantry door on the side of the mobile home had a piece of plywood just screwed over the whole opening of the door. There was no door there. And so that kind of plays into this coming up. We always thought it was kind of weird, like, okay, why isn't the door there? But, it was a mobile home, so who knows what somebody had done to it. But so it was probably maybe 2 months after we lived there that I was sleeping. Me and my brother slept in the very end of the mobile home, and it was kind of raised off the ground. They had blocks under it, so it was sitting like 3 feet off the ground in that spot. And I'm laying there, and my brother's sleeping next to me, and I'm right under the window, and you can see the light, coming through the window from the night sky was kind of lit up and stuff. And there was 3 kittens up in the windowsill, and I had one on my chest. I was laying on my back, and I was playing with one on my chest. And all of a sudden, all the kittens just stopped, and I looked up in the windowsill, and all 3 kittens were just all poofed up and looking out the window, and their tails were all poofed up and stuff, and their heads were turning the same. And so even the cat I was playing with just stopped and was froze. And so I just kind of sat there for a second, and pretty soon I could just hear this boom, 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 and I could follow it. And the cat's heads were churning as it walked, and I could follow it as it walked. And it walked right past my bedroom and right around the back of the trailer and went right over to that pantry door. And it just stopped right there. And I had, I'm sure I had fear in my eyes. It was scary. You could feel it just doom, doom. And so I kind of got up to my feet, just crawled over my brother and went over to the door, and it just barely made a click sound. And I was right across the hallway from that pantry area. There was no door on the inside. So I was directly across the open hallway from it. And I heard it stop. So I crawl out and I go up to the door handle, and it's like click. And I just heard doom, 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 take off running. And it was gone in like 4 or 5 steps. And so I opened my door because I knew it was gone. I opened my door and I blew past that pantry opening, went right into my mom and dad's bedroom and flew in there and said, Mom, Dad, there's a monster outside. And she was like, no, it's the cats fighting. I'm like, no, it broke the house. And that's exactly how I said it. I could actually feel the trailer kind of like shudder when it. Oh, I didn't even say that part, did I? Okay, when it stopped walking. Sorry, I got ahead of myself. When I heard it stop walking, it was just quiet for a second, and then I could feel the trailer move, and that plywood, I could hear it go, just broke that plywood. And that's when I got like, oh man, it's coming in. So I jumped up, and when I turned the door handle, that's when it went off. So I blew past that spot, ran into my mom and dad's bedroom. They said it was a cat. So I said, no, it's a monster. And so the next day, got up and went to school. And my mom and older brother picked us up from school, and he's like, hey, David, do you remember what you heard last night? I'm like, yeah. And he goes, wait till we get home. So we get home, and my whole family, there's 6 kids, and my mom and dad, we're all out there, and my dad's just standing there at the pantry door on the outside of the trailer, just standing there looking. So we walk up, and you can see not prints, but you can see it was all matted down underneath it, and there was these push-in marks at the very top of the plywood. I mean, the very top of it. And they're like, well, my mom's like, well, Chuck, what kind of bear? How big does a bear have to be to do that? And he goes, just a big bear. And so I called my mom recently, and I was like, and she refused to. She thinks I'm insane, and that's fine. But I asked her, I said, Mom, remember the trailer was like 3 feet off the ground? And she goes, yeah. And I said, well, it broke at the top of the door, right? And she goes, yeah. And I said, well, that was like, would you say 8 or 10 feet up off the ground? She goes, yeah. And I said, there ain't no black bear in California breaking plywood 10 feet up off the ground. And so that was the first, for myself, that was the first true, thing that I didn't know what it was. I didn't know anything about Bigfoot or nothing like that. To me, it was just, I knew something wasn't right, that it was like a person walking around and doing that.
Wow, that's crazy. That is
It scared
crazy.
me.
That's one of the best. That's one of the best details I think I've heard about trying to get into a trailer.
And
And I
it
know
was a pan.
I interrupted you when you were talking about the scream too. So I want to make sure that you can finish that
Okay.
because you said that your mom was kind of tearing up and talking to your dad about that. So what happened? And we'll come back to this, but tell me,
Okay.
because I know people in chat are going, God, you're interrupting. Scott, shut up.
I just kept going, I think.
but I want to let you finish that part about the scream because that's probably because if that was one of the first things too that you heard. So what happened? What was the impression then with your family after that happened?
We always talked about it, the screams that we heard, and it was night after night, and it was always about the same time. Us kids had to go to bed fairly early. We're all pretty young, and so I would say this is winter time. It was probably 8 or 9 at night. It was dark, but we would open the window, and you could just, because you could hear it with the window closed, so we would all get in front of the window and open the window up, and it would do it probably about every 15 or 20 minutes. Just I can't even do it, but just like somebody yelling that's being slowly torn apart or something. That's the best way I could describe it. But it was so loud, and you could tell it was far up in that bluffy area up above us. And as I grew up, I was like, I know there ain't no mountain lion, no bobcat, no fox that's got a set of lungs like that. I've heard them all myself, and so has tons of other witnesses heard them all, and it's not the same thing. So my mom, yeah, she would just tear up, and after a while, she would just have enough of it and shut the window and make us go to bed. And so she didn't even want nothing to do with it.
And how long when it would scream like that? How long did it usually last? So like 15 seconds, 30 seconds, or shorter?
Probably closer to like 10 seconds, 5 or 10 seconds, just like a short scream, and then it'd be kind of quiet. Then you kind of go up and scream real high pitched, and it just sounded frantic. Whatever it was doing, it was just like a frantic short call.
And was it usually just one, or would you hear like calls back and forth?
It was just one voice that was doing it, or one maker of the sound, but it would do like multiple sounds in a row sometimes, but it was just sounding like one coming from one spot.
Any other imitation sounds like of other animals or any other sounds that you ever heard or anything like that?
Not really, not then, but we wouldn't have probably known better anyway then.
How long did y'all live there in that trailer?
It was, I would say, maybe 3 months or something like that. My mom and dad just kind of had enough. It was kind of a weird trailer anyway. I just, and like in a weird way, just felt heavy, I guess is the best way to say it. And it was in an area where it wasn't very feasible for my dad to go to work and his kids to go to school and stuff. And so it was kind of just like a pit stop on our way to where we ended up staying for longer, most of my growing up years and stuff.
Okay. Now you can go back to the pantry.
So the pantry. So the people that had moved out before us, they had left food in there, and so it was actually, that's what it was a food storage pantry. And so this is from me and Dede and my sister and stuff talking, and we just assume it was winter time and that maybe they were coming. This is all hypothetical. We don't claim to know anything, but hypothetical that they may have come out of the high country, and we were right at the foothills of the high country, of the wilderness. There was nothing behind us, and just maybe that's where they would come to get food. I don't know. And
because it snows, right?
Yeah, it snows right above where we lived. Heavy snows. So that was pretty much the end of that area. And I always said it had like a chemical smell around there. It could have been just like a chemical smell, but it just had like a off chemical smell. I can't explain. It didn't smell like a skunk or anything like that,
Did it
but
smell
just
like sulfur or anything?
that may have been the closest thing that you could say it smelled like.
That's interesting.
It is.
Do you want to talk about the tracks?
The what?
Steps, tracks,
I did.
footsteps?
I did. That's those. Okay, and then so that kind of ends that area, as far as the Junction City area, and then right after that, we moved up near Trinity Lake, California, and we bought property, and that's when we stayed at that trailer we were just talking about. Was kind of in between us getting that property and moving up there, and we moved up. It's near Trinity Lake, California, and real kind of wild place and real a lot of desolate and wilderness areas and big trees and stuff. And so we moved there, and this is probably the hardest one for me to spit out because it sounds insane, and very few people in my family even know about this story. My granddaughter does, and my wife does, and two of my sisters, and I think that's it. And so what happened there was I had woke up. Me and my brother slept on a hide-a-bed in the living room, and this is in another mobile home, but a single wide. And we just bought the property and flattened it a spot out and pulled that trailer up there and moved up in there. And we may have lived there for maybe a year or something before this happened, a year or two. I keep trying to think about the timeline, and I think I may have been about 8 or 9, probably closer to 9 or 10. And so one night I woke up on the hide-a-bed with feeling like I'd been having my throat pressed on, like being choked. And I woke up kind of out of breath. And so us kids always went to mom when we woke up with a nightmare or something. We always went to mom. And so I go into mom and dad's bedroom and I'm going, Mom, I can't breathe. And she goes, what's wrong? And I said, well, I woke up and I feel like I'm being choked. And she goes, well, can you breathe? And I said, yeah. She goes, well, then I think you're fine. Why don't you just lay here with me? And I said, okay, great. So my mom moved into the middle and my dad's over on the right-hand side and I'm on the left side. And I'm laying there on my back and it's probably been laying there maybe a half hour or something. I'm still kind of just wondering, trying to recover my breath and trying to wonder why my throat felt tight and tense. And so I'm laying there on my back with my eyes closed. And pretty soon I could kind of see like light flickering in my eyes. And the closest thing that I can compare to would be if you were sitting outside at night in front of a campfire and you close your eyes, how you can see the flames kind of change, flicker through your eyelids. And so I was laying there and I seen that. So I thought, well, am I actually seeing this? So I concentrated and I could see it. So I opened my eyes and I couldn't see the source, but I could see through the walls, I guess is how the best way to explain it. My mom, dad's door was shut, but there's light coming through the walls and you could see that it looked like it was moving side to side through the trailer and it was getting brighter and brighter. So I knew it was coming my direction. And so I sit up in the bed right at that time, right above my mom and dad's door, kind of where the ceiling and the wall meet, right above the door. This red ball about that big, smaller than a basketball, just a glowing red orb, a ball of light came through the wall and just like, and just, it didn't make a noise, but it just like stopped as it was coming through, and it was like halfway through the wall, so it looked like the other half of the ball was on the other side of the wall and I couldn't see it, but it was red and it was not solid, it was moving. And my son said it best, like red plasma, and I said, yeah, like plasma or lava. It looked like it was turning, inside, just kind of flowing. And it had a purple aura around it that I would say was like 4 feet around it, the outside, and it was throwing these huge white sparkles, just like a sparkler for 4th of July. But they shot out of the edge of the red ball and went out before they got to the edge of the purple aura. And it was just beautiful, really. It wasn't making a sound. It wasn't smoking. I couldn't smell nothing, no smoke or anything. It just came through and just stopped right there. So I put my hand on my mom's hip, who's laying right beside me. She's facing away from me. and the room's lit up. I could see the paneling on the walls through the purple aura and stuff, and the room's lit up red, and so I could see clearly. And I put my hand on my mom's hip and pointed at it, and I'm like, "Mom, look at that red light." And she didn't move, and I was like, "Mom, look at that red light." And she started to lift up, and like I said, as a kid, it confused me, but now looking back, it makes sense that what happened. But she just started to lift up, and then she laid right back down, and I could see from her side profile her lips didn't move, and she's like, "Son, you're dreaming, go back to sleep." And it was her voice, but her lips didn't move. And I'm like, it's kind of hard because I'm like, "No, I'm not, Mom, it's right there." And I'm still pointing at it, reaching out, and it was like 1, 2, and it was like, that's it of that memory. And the next thing I know, it's kind of like waking up from surgery and having that dazed, kind of figuring out where you're at, kind of dazed moment. And I'm still pointing with my hand, and my hand's still kind of in the same position, but now I'm looking what looks like a glass wall. And I can just see it was clear. A glass wall is what the best way I can describe it. And I can see stars, and it's dark except for the stars. So it wasn't like I was in town or around lights of any kind, just stars. And kind of confused me for a second. No fear, just kind of like waking up from surgery, Phil. And I'm still pointing, so I kind of lower my hand down, and I feel somebody holding my hand. And I'm thinking it's my mom or dad, because I'm just trying to figure out, just trying to come to my senses. And I look down at my arm that's up in the air, my left hand, and it's kind of like this. And I can see my pajamas, and I would have never remembered, but because of this, I remember they were like Otis dog. Back in the day, the cartoon with Otis, a little dog. I can see the print on the sleeve, and I'm holding my hand. And as I look up my arm, holding my hand, this is gonna sound, was a black skin, red hair hand, and it had thick, wrinkly skin, and the fingernails were black, and they came to a point, kind of like they started like ours, but they kind of came to a point. And the best way I can describe is that what they show is like vampire nails, kind of that sharp, not a claw, but like a sharp pointed fingernail and thick. And it had white streaks in it, just like ours do. It had little white streaks in it, but they were black. And so I go from the hand and I look right up the arm, and it's a red haired, hairy arm, and it go right up to his face, and it it's a Bigfoot, and it's looking down at me, and it has whites in its eyes. It's not moving, but it's just looking straight down at me, and it's standing right beside me holding my hand. And I look at it, and it's just staring at me, and I would say it had to have been probably 6 or 7 feet tall. It was tall, it was taller than my dad. He wasn't very tall, but it was definitely at least the size of an adult male. And it's and so my eyes go to his eyes, look at it, and then it goes to his arm, and his arm was holding the hand of Mama Bigfoot. She was red. I couldn't see breast. It was like my view was being controlled, is the best way I can say it. Like just looking at certain things is all I'm able to see. And so I look up, and it's holding the hand of Mama, and she's looking straight down at me and has white in her eye, big brown eyes. All three of them, ones I'm going to explain, all had big brown eyes with whites around them, and they were just looking at me. And she was probably 8 feet tall, probably in that range, maybe 9. And she's holding the hand of the male. So they're kind of beside us looking down on me and the little one. It wasn't little, but the littler one. And so we're all looking at each other. And then I glance my view to the right of them. And then is the first time I can kind of see that I'm in this big room, and the walls and the ceiling was probably 15 or 20 feet tall or something, like really tall room. And it was like a dirty cream color or a real dull white color. And I couldn't see no light fixtures, but it was lit up, just kind of just where it was comfortable lighting, I guess is the way to say it. And this gets weirder. So as I kind of go from the daddy Bigfoot and I look over, standing up against the wall, and I could see nothing but their face, was the first one was probably a 9 foot tall mantis looking
Mm.
being.
Alien.
A being is is the best way I can describe it. And this whole time, there's no fear in me. There's no emotion. It's like sitting in a room with people and you're just looking around at people, just watching the scene. And this thing had bone for its face. It wasn't skin, and it had what I consider like charcoal bone, like burnt colored bone cheeks that were real prominent, like real prominent cheekbones. Couldn't really tell a mouth. It was kind of more pointed, but it was closed. And it had black eyes, and they were oval shaped, and they wrapped around the side of its head, and they were big. And it was looking down into the room, not at me, but down into the middle of the room. And standing beside that one was probably a 9 foot tall or so blue looking alien being that you could see the veins in it. And uh, it had a big round head and round eyes. The eyes were silver, like cops glasses, that mirrored lens. They were silver like that, like they would reflect, but I didn't see a reflection, but just silver round eyeballs. And it was looking down the same way the first one was looking. So it went from that, and I looked down, and standing right off to my right is a little gray being, and the classic looking gray alien that's 3 or 4 feet tall, a little shorter than me at that time at my age. And I turned and looked at it, and it was looking up at those two, and its head was bobbing like it was talking, but no sound. It was just bobbing, looking up at the two. And then it was in a matter of like a second of me seeing it do that, it just turned and looked straight at me. And that's it of that memory. And the next thing I know is I'm waking up from that same surgery feeling, and I'm walking up the hallway towards our kitchen, and I hear my own voice in my head saying, "Drink pickle juice, drink pickle juice." So I went to the refrigerator and I grabbed the old jar of pickles and I chugged pickle juice, and that's all I remember of that night.
Wow.
Yeah.
As he
How-
cleared out the cat chutney.
Okay. So we're gonna kind of take this bit by bit, I think.
It was a lot.
No, because when you started your first when you started talking about the wall being kind of transparent and looking into stars, like I kind of knew where you were going with it actually. And so it wasn't really surprising. I mean, it is and it isn't. I think as far as you pulling out the description of the praying mantis, because I'd heard that in a couple other times also. How you talked about there were 3 Bigfoot that were there present, and then there were a mantis, and then kind of a bigger or another alien there that are above them. So how big in comparison could you feel or tell, or when you looked, even if you can, was the difference in size between the biggest Bigfoot that you saw and then that praying mantis and that other alien?
I would say they were close. I would say they were at least the size of the height of the female looking one. I didn't see breasts. It was like my eyes were controlled in what I could see. I didn't notice any hands or
Okay, gotcha.
anything like that. But I would say they were the daddy Bigfoot was probably in the 10 foot range. I mean, I'm guessing I was pretty young, and it was just towering above me.
Right.
And it was, we're all 4 holding hands. And then the 2 beings were probably, if I had to guess, were probably about 12 feet or something, 12 or 15 feet from me with their backs to a wall. And like I said, it was like I couldn't see any of their arms or feet. That don't remember any clothes on anything or something like that. But I would say those 2 were fairly close. They weren't as bulky as the Bigfoot, but their height was pretty close.
And at any time during that experience, did you feel like you were communicating with any of those beings, or did you feel like or like you were just kind of being kind of controlled a bit and kind of being shown different things, and then no communication or anything like that?
Absolutely. I do not feel like there was any communications other than before when I heard my mom's voice and it said, "You're dreaming, son, go
Right.
back to bed." That one,
And her
and
lips
then
didn't move. Right.
right, and
Right.
then me coming back to and walking up the hallway. I don't know how I would say go drink pickle juice to myself, but so it was almost like my own voice. But I know in my mind that the gray was communicating with the two. I mean, it was looking right up at him and it was bobbing and they were looking, just staring straight at that. And I felt like the Bigfoot were in the same predicament I was. We were all there together from
Interesting.
them.
Did
And what
did
kind of
did you feel frozen while all of this was going on?
I didn't. It was like my mind didn't intend for me to move. You know, I was just standing there, but my head and my eyes were moving just to look at certain things. But I would say if I would have wanted to run there, I couldn't have. That I was just standing there, and that's what. And to me, that's what the Bigfoot were looking at me. They had emotion on their eyes. I don't know if I did or not. I wasn't scared or frightened, you know, or upset or anything. I just remember I was just looking around. I was okay with where I was at, I guess is the best way to say it. I wasn't fearful, but it was like they were locked on me, which is weird. It was why wouldn't they be looking around the room too? But they were stuck looking at me, and the other three weren't paying the beings weren't paying any attention to us until the gray stopped bombing its head and turned right at me. And that I don't feel like there was any communication, and I do feel like I was kind of frozen there.
Did you notice how much time had kind of gone by between the time you woke up with the feeling of the choking or not being able to breathe, and then to the seeing the orb, and then to the time that you walked into drink pickle juice? Did it feel like there was kind of lost time, or did you not even have any sensation whatsoever?
No, I could tell that something had happened. That's the best way I can describe it. I could tell that I was in mom and dad's room and then I wasn't. And then now I'm walking up the hallway. That's kind of, but no way of telling time. I'd say from the time I felt the choking sensation to the time it happened, because I was completely aware, you know, everything was normal, that there was probably an hour or maybe an hour and a half that had went by that I was laying there. It bothered me so bad that I was just laying there, you know, like kind of dumbfounded at why I felt like that. It was kind of weird to swallow and stuff. And I associate that with whatever happened. It may not have been, I might have been laying on my own arm or something or my pillow and choked myself out, but it just seemed kind of really weird coincidence.
Had you
Did
seen any? Go ahead, Mark. Go ahead, Mark.
Well, I was going to ask, did any of your other siblings have any other kind of experiences like this?
No, but none of them. They
No.
always
Yeah.
remembered me talking about the red light. That's all I called it. It was a red light, and I didn't tell any of them that the whole story. I just kind of locked it down, and until one day, it was kind of funny that me and we were watching TV, and she just went like to go in the bedroom to do something, and I was like, you know, I'm going to watch Ancient Aliens, and just because it just kind of felt like I wanted to see what it was about. And one of the show that happened to come on was they were showing that exact same thing, like going around some army base or something, and you know, it was like a recreation of it and stuff. And I just kind of paused it and I ran in there and I actually had tears in my eyes. I don't know why, but just like this flood of emotion. I'm like, babe, that's what I saw right there. I cannot believe it, because I never even heard about anything like that or seen anything like that before. And that was what, 10 years ago, maybe 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So, and then something
Like
kind of weird.
repressed.
What?
It was a repressed memory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remembered it, but I just didn't associate it that other people could have seen the same thing out there, that red ball of energy that could go in and out of wherever it wanted, and it could, you know, go through things. And so, but what was kind of weird about that too was our neighbor lived down below us. Our closest neighbor was probably a quarter mile away or something. It was real sparse houses along that road. But But they used to tell us that they fed a family of 3 Bigfoots from their deck every night.
Oh,
And their deck was off the ground. I mean, we all lived on kind of the side of a mountain. And our family just kind of rolled our eyes. We didn't say it to their face or nothing, but they're like, yeah, every night we feed a family of 3 Bigfoots, a mom, a dad, and a young one from our deck. And so I found that very interesting that that's what was with me there was a family of 3. And I'm assuming, this is just my own assumption, that that was the same ones that was with me there.
Interesting.
wow.
It was
you
crazy.
Had you had any type of activity outside UFO like on that property at that time, or any orbs in the woods or anything like that? Nothing.
Nope.
Okay.
Nothing. Nope. I've seen, through later times in life, we've seen UFOs and lights and stuff, big beams of light shooting down out of nowhere and stuff like that. But that's just like seeing something. That's not necessarily like a close encounter, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Can you talk about Cindy's stories next?
So then shortly after that, it was probably a couple of years after that, we lived up there for quite a while. My mom and my dad started getting in fights and stuff and arguments, and were starting to separate. They were kind of just wanting to separate temporarily, but it ended up being divorced. But my mom had moved into the town of Weaverville, and it's wild all around Weaverville too. Right now, it's all burning around there. But and so my mom and my sisters lived there, and me and my younger brother stayed with my dad at that property. And every now and then we'd go down and stay with my mom and stuff for the weekend or whatever. But so my sister had something happen that she didn't tell anybody until she told me about it just not too long ago in the years, maybe 5 years ago or something. And her story was, and I just talked to her today to make sure it was fine to tell her story and to get refreshed on what happened. And so her and my sisters, the 2 sisters were arguing. And so my one sister just took off and went walking out into the woods behind my mom's house there. It wasn't our property, but the house they were renting. And it was all like oaks, and there's some pine and fir and stuff there. It's kind of more chaparral type country. And so she goes walking back in there quite a ways, and she'd been sitting down on this dry water puddle, and there was a bunch of oak leaves and stuff, and she was just sitting down playing in that dry puddle with the leaves and stuff, and heard a weird sound. And she looks up, and she could see there was a group of trees off to the side, and she could see something behind the trees swaying side to side looking right at her. And so she locked eyes, and she said her eyes got big, and she felt instant fear for her life. And she was between 13 and 14 at this time. And she jumped up and started running as fast as she could back towards the house. And she turned around and looked, and this big one, it was black. It looked just like Patty, she said. And she could tell by its face and the build how big it was that it was male. And she could actually see the junk to tell it was male. And it rushed out of the trees and was like on a full charge at her on 2 legs, full charge. And while she was, running, looking back, and sees this thing start to charge out, she sees another smaller one. She doesn't know if it was a female or if it was a younger one, but it was, another one jumped out with its back to her and put its hands on the chest of the bigger one. It kind of like stopped it. And she said it was like a dark red, almost black. And she could just see the arms, the back of it and the arms stopping the big one. And she said it just let out this, like a, is the best way I can, like a short, just like it was mad and irritated. And so she just turned and just ran straight to the house. And she used to always, when we'd go camp and stuff, Dave, is there bears out here? Dave, is there bears? And I was like, Sin, maybe, but. And so she was always living with this fear of bear. And later on in life, just like 5 years ago, she finally said, well, I'm going to tell you why I was so scared of the woods. It wasn't from the bears. It was from that. And she gets tears in her eyes every time she tells that story. So that was her personal experience.
Wow.
She felt like it was going to kill her, and it had the look on its face like it was coming to do business.
Did she get a good look at its face, or could she describe at all what any detail, or she was just so frightened that she just kind
It
of...
was black skinned, and she said it looked just like Patty, but like just heavy features like a male would look, and big. She couldn't tell how the size it was, and I don't know exactly how far the tree um, group of trees was from her, but she said it was close, and it felt like it was gonna come and get her. And I guess she could see the junk on it, and it was black skin on its face and stuff. And when it went, she could see the teeth. She couldn't see fangs or nothing, but she could see its mouth. Like it was just mad. And the other one was still holding on to its chest, kind of looking up at it, holding on, like making it stop. And that was it. She just turned and ran for her life.
Yeah, I would too.
I would too. And later on in life, I went back there all the time and deer hunted all kind of in that backcountry. There's nothing back there. It's just kind of scrub brush and just kind of rocky and not bluff, but just rocky terrain. And there's just nobody really goes back there. And I don't know why they would have been in there, but unless they were hunting deer that maybe hung on the edge of town or something. I'm not sure. I don't know.
Wow.
And how far away was that from where you were living?
That was right behind the house that my mom had rented in town.
Okay.
And when I say in town, it's not in town. It was on the outskirts of town. And
Wow.
so, yeah, she thinks she walked back a mile away from the house, and I really don't see that. But maybe, in her mind it may have been. But she said it was way back there, and it took her a while at a full sprint to make it back home. And she just came in, and my other sisters were like, "What's wrong with you? What's wrong with you?" She's like, "Nothing, nothing." And she was like all sweat and stuff. And she just walked to her room and shut the door and just stayed in there.
Was there, did you heard of any, I know your mom probably wouldn't have told you, but was there any other activity around that town at all where she lived?
Not there. It's a good area. I'm sure they're there. I mean, Bluff Creek is just like this area. It's the same. It's just Bluff Creek's over here, and you go around those same mountains, and Weaverville and stuff like that, and Junction City are kind of on the same mountain range, kind of at the foothills of them.
Is it about an hour from Weaverville, Bluff Creek?
Bluff Creek's probably a little further, just because the drive is so slow to get in there. But we were probably from Weaverville. It's less than an hour to get to Willow Creek. That's the best way I can. I've never been to Bluff Creek, so I don't know, but I've been to Willow Creek lots.
Dede, tell us if you've had any experiences.
Well, I was involved with the experience that we had, the encounter we had with David's sister Cindy in the Elliott State Forest, but that's coming up. My history and experience family-wise was with my older brother. He's about 3 years older than me, and he was up in the woods where I was talking about towards Crater Lake in the Cascades, and he was up there with his friends, and they were partying up toward that way. And David's going to help me with this story too.
He told me the story lots because we talked about it a lot.
So he's got better memory of it.
So it was like up in the Cascades, up this area called Medicine Creek. And there's actually like a rock overhang and you can go under that and you can see the Native Indian drawings, like red drawings and stuff of animals and handprint, like human handprints. And they had different animal drawings, and then they had the Bigfoot drawing on there. And they had one where they show one all the time when they do like the petroglyphs. And they show petroglyphs of it, and it's kind of like its arms are down, and you can tell it looks like a Bigfoot. And it had the tears coming down on it. There's exact one of those on there. So and it's called Medicine Creek, so that kind of tells you a lot about the native background of it. But he was partying up in there, and they went way up in this area, and then you had to park, and you could walk out on this peninsula that was like bluffs going down on all three sides, except where you walk in was the only way in, and like straight up and down bluffs, 1,000-foot bluffs, and they were out there. Good place to party, I guess, in the middle of the night. But it was in the middle of the night, and he was the most sober because he was driving, and he said, he sobered up really quick when he heard the same type of woman screaming sound that was close, and it just screamed super loud, and he turned and looked where it's coming from, and he could see the figure standing behind a small fir tree, and it was just rocking the tree back and forth. And then I don't know if once it saw him looking at it or if it just decided, and it just started peeling the limbs off of it, and the limbs were just flying.
Jesus.
And so he was like, "We got to go now." And the other two guys were pretty oblivious to it. And he's like, "We got to go now. We got to go now." And he said, as they left, he was kind of pushing them like, "Let's go, let's go." And as he turned around and looked, the limbs were still flying off of it, just flying off this tree. And so, and that was pretty much like her family history. They had some other stuff as far as kind of different stuff going on too, but not really Bigfoot related or anything like that.
How close did he say he was to him seeing it rip those branches off the tree? Like 100 yards or so?
50 to 75 yards is what he thought.
Wow.
And it was not blocking the path, but it was off to the side of the only way to get off that peninsula. It was like maybe that was its perch at night or something. I don't know. It was like it was telling them to get off of there, and it allowed them to go by. And he was just like shoving the people, and they were oblivious to it. And he said it just continued the whole time, just ripping limbs off.
Wow.
Could you hear it cracking and stuff like that, or was it just kind of so far kind of away it just looked like it was like shaking and stuff was kind of falling off of it?
Oh, he said at first it was just rocking it back and forth, and it was just like swaying it. And he said it may have been like a 12 or 15 foot tall tree or something, like a young fir, and it was just rocking it back and forth, and he could clearly see the outline of it. It was lit up enough where you could clearly see it. And about the time he noticed the tree doing that, it just started just tearing him off. And he said you could see it just grab one and throw it, and grab one and throw it, grab one and throw it.
Wow, that's amazing.
It is. I was like, man, I think I would like to have seen that.
And that was a place where people typically kind of went, you said, and kind of like hung out and drank beers and stuff like that?
Not really.
Okay.
He's that kind of, he was like a rock hound. Her brother was like a rock hound. And so he would go find places where he could, get good samples and stuff like that. And get away from, and it was just one of his favorite spots because you could just walk out there and it was just bluffs on all sides of you except the way you came in. And he just loved it. It was a big country and stuff and big view. So I don't think they went up there very often. I don't know if they ever had before.
Okay. Gotcha.
Okay. Tell us another encounter, David.
This is the big one.
So this happened in 2019, and me and Dede's bow hunted for elk since we moved to Oregon. Even before we moved to Oregon, we bought our non-resident license and came up here. That year we camped in a tent for the whole month, pouring rain and stuff most of the time, and just camped in a tent by ourselves and never had nothing. We hunted this area for probably 15 years or something and never had anything weird happen. We loved it. It was just a fun area to go up and hang out, and we'd go up there all time during the summer and stuff and just run around or camp out and just look for elk and deer and bear, whatever you could see. And so this happened in 2019. It was August 28th, I think, or 26th, August 26th. We got up to the area where we were going to camp. Anybody wants to look it up? It was the 9000 road in the Elliott State Forest near Coos Bay, Oregon. And so
we were elk hunting.
Yes, we were going to be bow hunting on the Saturday. And we got up there Thursday evening, and we had time to kind of get our camper off our truck and get camp kind of set up. And my sister was there with us, and she was just going to sleep in her car. And I, like a half hour before dark, I ran up to this one spot and grabbed a trail camera that I had up there for 3 months. And got it back to camp and we looked at it, and there was a bunch of elk and deer and stuff, so nothing cool on it or anything. And we kind of got settled down, and probably about 10 o'clock, just this big loud knocking sound from way up behind us on camp. And my sister goes, well, I guess we got guests like that. And I'm like, no, there ain't nobody up there. There's not even no roads up there. There's nobody up there. And she goes, huh? And so kind of, right away, you're kind of like, okay, we'll just go with it and just write it off. We're going to be rational about everything and just write it off. So for the first couple days, probably 3 or 4 days, no, for the first 2 days, it was just like sound of ripping stumps and logs and tree breaks and stuff. And she'd be like, David, what could that be? And I was like, well, I think it's a bear, hitting a stump, and the
Or
front
elk.
or
I've heard
elk,
of
yeah,
elk.
rubbing or fighting and stuff. They
Or
make a
just
lot of
traveling
noise.
through when they're all herded up and they're going through an area, they make a lot of noise.
Yeah, crashing and breaking and stuff. And so we just wrote it off. And so the opening day, which would have been Saturday, that was in the evening, we had took my sister and we drove up this one road where we always see elk off to the side. And we're like, we're going to go drive up there for the evening and just take a look. So we drive up there, and sure enough, there's a herd of elk with a nice bull in it. So we let my sister stay there with our dogs. And me and Dede jump out of the truck and just kind of start making our strategic plan and circling
Skirt
around and
around.
stuff. Yeah, got the wind right and everything. And they were down off below us. So we circled way around and came in around them. And as soon as we got off down there, my sister swears, and this is unconfirmed by us, but after all the events, I got to believe her, that she saw something black moving behind us, which we had just walked through there. And as far as we could tell, there was no elk there. We were going to the elk, and she saw something black move, and then she heard like 3 different areas, 3 different spots, 3 distinct knocks, and the elk took off, and we never got no shot, and we didn't even really know anything about it. We got back up there, and she's like, so where did you guys walk? And we kind of explained to her walk. She goes, you didn't walk right down here. And we're like, no. She goes, well, something black was moving through there behind you guys. And I'm like, okay. And she goes, and 3 different knocks while you guys were down there. Did you hear them? We're like, no, because we were moving through like this brush is like waist high and stuff. So it's like, shh, kind of moving through there. We didn't hear the knocks. And she's like, okay. And so we're like, okay, we'll write it off as whatever, but it could be.
So it's like they were 3 different ones were communicating with each other.
Yeah, it was like
It's
the
kind of
3 knocks
what we
came
were
from
thinking.
different areas. And just a hunch, maybe we interrupted their hunt too. Who knows? Maybe they had those elk, because they were all huddled in one spot when we saw them. And so we were like, hey, there's a good chance. So that's why we went in parked back around the corner and just snuck on around. And so I don't know if they had them surrounded, or if that had anything to do with it, or if the knocks were even the knocks from from a Bigfoot or what. But it was just 3 knocks. And so we wrote that off too, and just like, well, we're just going to hang out. We're just up here to be up here. We're going to be here. And so it happened on the 3rd day of hunting season. This would have been like a Monday or something like that. That right out of our camp, right off down below our camp, there's a big flat, and it's like a drop off the road 15 feet or so, and then a big flat down there, and there's a creek that runs back there and stuff. Just this big crash, like donk, like a big crashing knock sound, and then sound of either brush, like something running through the brush, or something coming down, or like the leaves falling off the tree. It was like boom, shh, like that, but big and loud. And that was maybe 75 yards from our camp. And my sister's got really good hearing. Dede's got good hearing too. But I think we were talking when that actually happened. I think so. And she just like all scared, like, what was that? And we're like, well, it was, we heard brush and stuff, but didn't put it all together. And she's like, no, brother, it was this big old knocking sound or break sound. And I was like, well, it's a creek bottom. There's a lot of alders. They tend to crash and, just tip over and rot and stuff and fall over. And it might have just broke and went down through the brush. And she's like, okay. And I was like, that's my best explanation. Or I thought, or it was elk butting heads, and one bull ran the other one off, and it was going through the woods. So then the fifth night, the fifth night, we were there and we're camped right on the edge of a gravel road, and there would just be a car coming every now and then through there. At night, it was just dead silent, and we're down in this the creek bottom, and there's ridges up on both sides of us, and thick and almost impenetrable country. And the fifth night, we didn't have a lantern out. Those other nights, we had a lantern out on the table outside and stuff, and we'd have our flashlights and shine them around and stuff, and have the gun out, the shotgun leaning out against the camper and stuff, just for bears or whatever for protection. And so the fifth night, all we had was this little citronella candle lit, and it was just barely enough light where you could kind of see the table that it was sitting on, but it was for the mosquitoes. And we were sitting around, and it was probably 10 or 10:30, and my sister smoked cigarettes, and so every time she'd get up to smoke out of our chairs, she would walk onto the gravel road to kind of get the wind out of our, so the smoke wouldn't go in our face. And I would stand up with her and just, I had a lantern, a headlamp on, and had it on green setting because it reflected eyeballs really good, just real good eye shine. It was dim, you couldn't see nothing, but you could see eye shine. And so I would just stand up and just kind of glance around all directions just to make sure it was clear for my sister to stand there alone and smoke. And I would go sit back in my chair with my wife. And so this time I get up and I turn on my lamp and I look right in front of us, and I look to the right up the road and kind of scan that way. And I turn and look to our left, and right like 30 yards from our camp, just these big set of glowing eyeballs looking at us. And they were like kind of a greenish yellow tint, kind of just a big bright, and they were far apart and they were big, but they were low to the ground. And so I'm like, we got eyes like that. My sister's like, what? And she walks up beside me and she looks, and Dede's still sitting in her chair. And she walks up and looks at, at the eyes, and she's just like, oh, kind of freaking out. It was sad because it was like, it scared her for a second. And I'm just locked onto it, and it's looking straight at me. Well, it's looking straight towards us, and it's not turning. It's not blinking, just staring straight at me. So I just stare straight back. And she goes to her car, rolls up the window for her little dog that she has in the car. I don't, just kind of not panic, but just making sure her dog was safe and didn't jump out to go running up there or nothing. And she comes walking real fast right back up to me and sees it again. And she's like, oh crap, kind of walks off. And about that time, I tell Dede, I'm like, I need a light. And so she gets up and goes, and the gun, yeah, which was back in the camper. and I'm thinking at this point, honestly, I'm thinking it's a bear. And I'm like, well, I'm going to, warning shot and scare the bear off, or just stand there and let, spook the bear off, whatever. We're just looking at each other. So Dede goes in, I can hear her in there. She comes out and walks right up beside me. She goes, here you go, babe, like that. And I turn and grab the light and turn back, and it's gone that fast. And it was,
as you lost eye contact.
As soon as I broke eye contact, it was gone. And we'd been staring at each other probably 45 seconds up to that point, just looking. And so I grabbed the shotgun, and I'm like, and it's gone. And I'm like, well, how to do that? And I go, where'd it go? And they're like, I don't know. And there was not a sound. And it's just thick brush. I mean, you can't really move quietly.
Right off of a road.
And yeah.
But there was no place to go but down. And we looked at the same area over and over again to try to, figure it out, what the position was. And I think it was off the side of the road, and it just kind of crawled down.
Like it was laying on the road off the bank, and it's like its body was off the bank and its upper body was on the road, and like it was leaning with it, staring at us with its upper body on the road. I cannot confirm that. This is kind of speculation, but I thought, okay, I've gotten some big bears. I just got a huge one, like 500-pound bear, just like last year, and their eyeballs are close. It's right on the side of their nose. And I was even like, Dede, look how close this bear's eyes are together and how little they are. They're beady. And then I thought, okay, well, maybe it was an elk. And then I thought, well, elk's eyes are on the side of their head more, and they're still not that far apart. Elk's head's not very far apart, and they're not huge eyes. And why would it be literally like 2 feet off the ground? An elk's like a horse height. I mean, it could have his head all the way down, but it didn't fit in our minds that something how an elk would react. They don't sit there and stare at you. They
And
don't.
where it was in position to the road.
Yeah, and it would have had to have been standing on the edge of the road with its head down, staring at me until I grabbed the shotgun and the light, and then it would have been gone without a sound. And so that none of that fit. So that after that, I was like, well, I'm still trying to. I'm going to think of every other explanation before I go to the Bigfoot thing. And I was like, well, do you want me to go ahead and send a warning shot that way? And they're like, yeah. We're all kind of just stunned by it for a second. I mean, it was like right there. And so I just pointed up in the air towards the direction and ripped one off, and still couldn't hear nothing run off or anything like that. And I didn't aim towards it, but so my sister's like, well, what if it comes back? And I go, if it comes back, we're in trouble because it was acting weird anyway. And then after a gunshot, if it comes back, we're going to have to do something to this bear. And we had tags and stuff. We wouldn't have been legal at night, but we would have protected ourselves. And so that, and I was like, well, we'll just go check it out in the morning. We'll walk down there. So we go down there the next morning immediately. We didn't even get up and go hunt. We wanted to go check that out. So we walked down there to where it was laying, and we're like, man, you could tell it was right here. And there was like an old kind of rotty stump, a small one. It was like it was behind that and laying up on that bank. Could not see that. We're just assuming the body position. But you could see like one claw mark or a nail mark where it kind of kicked back into that off that road, and it turned the gravel. It was like one skid scratch mark in the gravel that you could tell was freshly turned, and it was looked like it just pushed itself back into the trees. And so that was the end of that night. And then the craziest, then the next couple nights we had, or the day you heard the crash. You want to tell that part of it? Where it crashed, you thought I shot the bull.
Okay, so there's a creek bed that goes up from where we were camped, and David went around the, what do you call
I
it? The road kind of goes
circled.
around, circles around, and he walked up the ridge line back behind that creek bed.
It was up on
And
the ridge top circling our camp, kind of.
right. And so we thought we heard, some elk in that area. And then, so he was going to go check that out around the back side. And so um, all of a sudden I heard a bull do a bugle.
Oh, yeah, you did hear me.
I heard the bull bugle. And so I said, oh, David must have, spooked one up. And it's coming this way. I'm going to go walk up that creek bed. And so I left Cindy at camp, and I walked up with my bow up the creek bed and was trying to follow the elk bugling in the tracks. I could see where it had went up that way, I thought, and that, any minute David was going to pop out, on the ridge back behind it, because I thought he was like spooking up the herd, or the bull at least. And then I didn't hear anything.
Well, first you didn't say about the big crash, right? That was the big crash happened first, or no?
On the other side, huh? It was on the left side of where I was on the creek bed. There was a big, huge crash, like it was a tree had fell, or an elk had moved through the wood. I don't know.
You said that you thought I'd shot a bull from up top and it had ran down and crashed right there. That's kind of what you'd explained it.
Okay. So, yeah. And so I thought that had all happened. And so I was just waiting for David to, pop out. And then he comes down. You came
back down the road.
Down the road, and there was no elk there. He never saw anything. He never heard anything, any of that. And so Cindy and I were sitting there, what just happened?
Yeah.
Because we're hearing elk and not seeing elk, and then we hear this big old crash, and David had no idea that all that had happened. And so what was it? Was it really an elk?
Mm-hmm.
Or was it something mimicking an elk? So that was kind of confusing.
Yeah. Do you want us to continue on to the last night, or do you want to intervene and ask any questions? Or
Have you got any questions before we go to the last night, Scott?
Well, when you're talking about hearing this crash, do you and hearing the elk call, the bull call, do you think that maybe something was imitating the elk bugle, or do you think that was a real elk?
Well, it sure sounded like an elk at the time. And if I remember right, the elk that I heard, or that I thought was an elk, was on the right side of that creek bed. And then the crash was on the left side of the creek bed. So
Hmm.
I was confused. So was that an elk or was that something else? And then was there two of them? I don't know. It was very confusing. By the time I got done, I was thinking I was gonna, maybe have a chance at a bull, to get a shot. But
And we'd
I
walk
don't know.
back there and looked, and
So
we went right to where she had walked and stuff, and where she heard what sounded like the bugle, and where the big crash was. And I went over there to where she said the big crash was, and I looked, and there was no. It's rainforesty type country around here,
terrain,
but
yeah.
I couldn't see any elk tracks back there or nothing. I couldn't find a tree down or anything like that. I couldn't find any sign of anything.
Gotcha.
Wow.
So
Okay.
so that wasn't even the last night. So
That's
here's
not
No,
even
the
the
last
last
night was the night we ended up leaving.
oh
And I'm telling you, it was so scarring that I almost didn't want to go back hunting or anything or camping in the woods again. And it wasn't a sighting, but so
Yeah,
my
it's
sister was
tough.
getting her buzz on, and she gets kind of lively, and I don't know how to say it. We were quiet, but we were having fun around camp and stuff. Me and Dede was totally sober and stuff.
Well, we heard elk.
Yeah,
We heard owls.
an owl. This owl, probably a barred owl, started hooting, and so my sister would sit there and kind of do her imitation, which was really funny, like a cat getting ran over or something. But and then she's like, "David, do it." So I would woo 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 kind of call back, and it would answer back, and I'd answer back, and he would answer back, and then and this is probably about 9 or 9:30 when this started going on, and it's the calls coming from where kind of down across the flat to where we had heard that knock, like the big crash, and then like the leaves falling or brush moving, whatever it was, like that general direction. And I would say the owl sounded 75 yards away, maybe something like that, 75 yards from us. And this is like an alder flat, and there's some big trees down there too, but it's mostly alders in this flat. And then across that flat, which is like 100 yards across, then it goes up the side of this steep ridge. And so my sister's sitting there calling the owl, and I'm calling back and forth, and she starts actually recording it with her phone. And we were getting ready, me and Dede was getting ready to go to bed because we were going to get up and go hunting early in the morning. And so we took our little min pin and took her onto the road and tried to get her to do her nightly stuff before we put her in the camper. And she just would not go. She refused. And that wasn't like her. She always went pretty good and stuff. So she refused and refused. And so my sister was kind of sitting over there by herself doing the owl calls and laughing when it would answer back and stuff, and with her phone recording. And so Dede's like, "Hey, Cindy, do you think you could just stop calling for a second while the dogs try to go to the bathroom because they're nervous?" And she goes, "Oh, okay." Well, when she did that, this is like Murphy's Law. As soon as she said, okay, she turns off the recording on her phone, and our dog, it was like 15 or 20 seconds later, 30 seconds, our dog still was like, "No, I want to go in. I want to go in." So I picked up the dog. She was really nervous, just like on edge. So I pick up our little dog, and me and Dede walk over, and my sister's right by the back of our camper. And right when we get there, and we're all standing together, and we were just getting ready, me and Dede was just getting ready to say, "Well, Cindy, we're going to go to bed." And we walk over there, and we hear the owl again. And it goes, and so this is the sequence. I'm just going to do the sequence real fast. It was like, whoo, 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 yip, yip, and it's like this roar that was just insane roar. And so it went from like this owl call that the owl at the end sounded like an angry owl, like went like hoo hoo hoo, yip yip, like a coyote yip, and then this just a roar, and just you could feel it in your chest, and we all three just like looked in that spot, and I actually said, "What the f?" I didn't mean to. It just came right out of my mouth, and all three of us were just standing there with our eyes watering and our chest just you could feel it, and the fear. It was like it was telling us it had had enough with us being there and to leave. That's what the sense was.
Yeah.
And it was like we all three agree that it was three different mouths that made the sounds, but they were right close to each other. It was like the owl was here, the yip yip was right next to it, and then the roar came from beside that. And I mean, it was so loud you could hear the trees ringing, just echoing loud. And so instead of going to bed, we all looked up and we're like, let's go, like that. And Dede ran in the camper, and I grabbed my shotgun. I'm standing out there, and by then we know this ain't no bear, no elk.
We're leaving.
We're leaving. And so I just kind of stood there guard while my sister grabbed stuff to put in her car, and Dede grabbed her purse and stuff out of the camper. We jumped in the truck, and we just left our camper up there, and we left and went home. And that was about like 10 or 10:30 at night or something. And it was like an hour and a half to get home. We're gone. And then we went up the next day and got the rest of our stuff. And then a week later, we went back up and got our camper.
I don't know what to say.
Now, how far away do you think that came from? That roar came from?
We think it was like 75 yards.
I gotcha.
Like it was kind of on the same elevation we were, but it was across that flat, somewhere on that flat, or right near the far edge of that flat.
So that was across the road?
No, it was on the backside. It was on the same side of the road we were on, and the road dropped down onto that flat, and then it just went out there like 75 yards or 100 yards.
I don't even think it was that far.
I don't either.
It was closer. It seemed like it was.
What'd your dog do?
She didn't do nothing, actually. She just was when we all stopped and looked up, and I honestly, she was looking away from me, and I had her in my arms, and we all of us just stopped and stared at that spot, and she's always shivery, like it gets cold, or right when she's getting tired, she kind of she did that, like, and kind of feel her vibrating, but I think I was too.
Oh, man.
You had mentioned earlier, I guess it was the third night that you had spotted some eye shine with your green head lantern. And I don't know how many times I have heard an eyewitness say that just as soon as you break eye contact and look again, well, if it's a half a second or a second, it's gone.
We've heard that too.
I don't know how it did it, honestly. I mean, I didn't turn and watch my wife walk up. She walked up and literally touched my shoulder and said, "Here you go." And I grabbed the flashlight first, but it was like both hands just turned right back, and it was already gone. And it didn't run down the road. There was kind of a little straight stretch area in a corner. It couldn't have crossed the road. I don't think it could have crossed the road that fast. And the way that little scuff looked like it just pushed itself back off the road right there.
Wow. If anybody in our chat room has any questions about any of these encounters, go ahead and put them in all caps. And Larry has a question. And he asked, when are we going elk hunting?
Hey, you can come here as a non-resident and buy a tag.
We take you.
Yep.
Absolutely.
We'll let Larry elk hunt and I'll do some boogering while y'all are elk hunting.
All right.
I'm telling you, it seems like right now because this year is the first time ever since we've been here that we're going to rifle hunt. So that's like in November, and we would be up there right now, and this would be when it was going on.
Right, first week in September.
Yeah, it was like the very end of August, first week of September. And so what's interesting about that same spot, we got back that night when we got back to our house. It was like midnight or something. And my sister gets on her phone and she looks up, and I think it's a BFRO report. I'm not sure. I can't remember where it was, but there, she looked it up, and there was a sighting at that exact same spot in 2001 where a guy was bow hunting for elk in there, and he was sneaking. And it's like real tall sword fern and a brush called salal. It gets pretty tall and stuff, pretty thick, and he was sneaking along this little ridge. And this is what the report said. And to his right, like 40 yards in full daylight, was a Bigfoot hunkered down like his same height and was stalking the same group of elk. And he backed out, and he said the Bigfoot never saw him. And so we thought, wow, that's kind of interesting. The exact same spot. Well, the same exact road, I should say.
Yeah.
And that road's only, I think, 3 miles long. It's like a little offshoot road that connects to it's like a network of roads. And it's real boogery up there. I mean, you definitely tell they're there.
Okay.
Yes, we did.
Luis Morez asked, David, did you ever report it to
I did
the
not.
BFRO or?
Cindy did.
No,
She called
no.
the show.
So I never reported it to any organization or anything like that. But right after she looked that up, because the only other camp that was up there was probably about 3 or 4 miles from us, but it was kind of up to the side from there. And there was like a family up there hunting, camping out and stuff. I don't know if they were hunting. I'm assuming they were camped out. And so we felt like for their safety that she felt for their safety that maybe we should let the state police, because it's a state forest. And so you have to call the Oregon State Police. And so she calls the police and says, I'm just going to let you know that we're concerned for this family that's camped out up there. She goes, but I just want to tell you about what happened to us. And he's like, okay. So she tells him, and he goes, well, we'll send somebody up there tomorrow and check it out. And so it was like a couple of days went by, maybe 3 or 4 days go by, and they call her back up. This Oregon State Police called her back up, and he goes, so we want you to go ahead and tell us about what you had, called us about the other night and give us more details. My sergeant wants us to investigate it. So she goes, okay. And she kind of explained everything that happened in more detail and stuff. And he goes, so what would you think it was? She goes, it was Bigfoot. We think it was Bigfoot, and we're just concerned for the people. And so I guess her directions are really bad. But she kind of led him on a goose chase, and they ended up getting a hold of her a couple days later and said they went up there and they couldn't find anything. But I thought it was weird that they would even investigate it. That's kind of weird for him to say that.
Mark Letfer is asking, have y'all talked to game wardens about any of this kind of activity, or have they let on, about the area?
No, it's quiet. Don't hear, and there's very few reports. There's actually reports right here near our house, just a couple miles from our house and stuff, but never heard. I think they would do anything they can to cover it up instead of talking about it. We both know this, that since we've moved here like 15 years ago, the elk population in that specific area there's like nothing hardy up there anymore, where you would see 5 or 6 herds in one day. And what's weird too is that there would be all kinds of people hunting and camp. Everywhere you go, there'd be a camp. And for the last 5 or 6 years, there's nobody up there. And so I don't know if all that has anything to do with it, or if they're not hunting up there because they're not seeing elk, or if they've had experiences too. I don't know. Just kind of quiet now.
Like last year, they shut the woods down for fire reasons, and there was like one herd that we saw of elk, and there was probably 9 or 10 in that herd. That was the only herd that we saw all season.
Mm-hmm.
And we heard it once and we saw it twice, I think, or the other
Yeah.
But it was just one herd. So the population of animals have gone down a lot.
Right. Okay, Larry has some good thoughts on this, and I think this goes back to your childhood. But he asked, has David thought of regressive hypnosis to see if he has any other experiences he cannot remember?
I have thought about it, and I've seriously considered it because I believe that if anything, that I could get more detail of what did happen. I maybe there's stuff blocked out from trauma, or or just early memories, and just can't get everything straight. But the only problem I have with that, and this is just my own personal, is that it makes you being
Vulnerable.
like concerned that maybe thoughts can be put into your mind that aren't real, or memories that aren't necessarily real. I like hypnosis or something. I don't know. But I have considered it.
Hmm. Okay. Diane has a question that's off topic, but she would like to know, what was the biggest elk you have ever harvested?
So you can show
It was that
it's
one.
back in the corner.
That one right
Oh,
there. It was a
nice.
6 point, and they probably weighed about 800 or 900 pounds.
Wow.
They're like the size of a good sized horse.
Was that bow hunting, or was that
Yes,
with? Okay.
longbow.
Really?
Yeah, I gave up compound. I hunted with compounds for probably 30 something years, and then been longbow hunting for probably the last 7 or 8 years or something.
So how close do you have to get on the longbow?
Man, closer to that. I got this
30
bull at about 30 yards.
Right.
for him. I can get a 50-yard shot
Yeah.
because I shoot a compound.
Okay. Christine Duez asks, have you ever seen elk with chronic wasting disease? What a great question.
That is a good question.
Not elk,
As far
but
as I
deer.
know, because we kind of read a lot on that through Fish and Wildlife and stuff, that there isn't any chronic wasting disease of deer or elk here. Um, but there is something going around called chronic hoof disease or something like that, where their hoofs are deforming and curving up, and if you get one, they want it reported.
Okay. I believe that's all. Unless if I missed your question, please put it back in there. Scott, do you have any questions?
Well, I was gonna say, how long had you been going up, or had you been going up to that area where you'd hunted there for a while? I mean, was that a consistent place that
We
you went over and over again?
Yeah, like
we started
17 years
hunting.
straight.
Yeah, we started hunting in 2003. My dad and mom were watchmen for a logging company
Oh yeah.
in the Elliott State Forest, and we started going up there and learning that area since 2003. And like David said before, like our season for bow hunting was usually about a month,
Right.
in the end of August through September. And then one year we stayed up there in a tent the whole time. But then I was getting over too much for that. So we got a camper 4 years ago, and so now we go up there and stay in our camper. But never had anything happen to us until uh, the year that in 2019 when we went up, and we've hunted all over that area, and it's just been the last couple of years that it's been less elk, less deer that we see, and then less hunters also, because it's a public land area
Mhm.
where we can go. That's
And have there been fires around that area at all? Also during
Not
this?
not not right there.
not in the
No.
Elliott, but around it in this area.
Yeah, like I would say probably the closest one would be 75 miles or something from
Okay.
us. It's not really close. It gets
Gotcha.
smoky, like socked in with smoke and stuff.
Okay. Lewis has another question. Have you ever had a dog disappear?
That's a What's so funny is that just reminded me of not we have not had a dog disappear, but up at that spot where we had the roar and the eye shine and stuff. Oh, it's really weird about it. I don't know if somebody likes to go up there and bury their favorite dogs there, or whatever, like if they spent time there. But there's some fir trees that have been planted, like after they log, they'll replant fir trees and stuff. And these trees were probably 10, 15 years old or something, like this big around. And this is okay. We're on the camp on the edge of the road, and that same drop off, and then that flat right there in those trees, there is like 7 or 8 dog collars that have been there long enough. The trees starting to actually grow around the collar, and all of them have the dog's name, like the little tag with their name. And there's like 7 or 8 of them. The trees are actually choking down on that. So I don't know what's up with that.
So it's
Wow.
like a
I mean,
little
that's
graveyard.
yeah, like a dog graveyard or a burial spot or somewhere they would just take their collars and leave them up there, like maybe as a memorial or something. I have no idea, but literally that's 20 feet from where we had our camper sitting.
Ooh. Okay. Larry asked, do you camp at the same exact spot every year?
Not there now.
That was the first year we camped at that spot, and it's the last year we're going to camp at that spot.
We've been back, but we don't camp there.
Okay. Lewis has another great question. Have you ever heard of anyone missing? Have you checked like the 411 database or anything like that?
That is a good question, and I have not looked into that. There's a story of a hunter that is kind of in the area where she grew up. Her brother told us his story, and there's no way that we can deny or or say it's true or confirm it. That supposedly there was a elk hunter and his 2 friends up in the Cascades and shot an elk with a rifle, and the 2 friends were going to go get the truck and drive around because they knew where it was heading. And when they were waiting for the guy to show up, he never shows up. So they go looking and couldn't find him. So they sent out the search and rescue after a time, whatever. And so it was, I don't know how many days later that they found I'm saying this with a grain of salt because I don't know if it's true or not. But supposedly he went to school with this guy and knew these guys that were with him. And he had shot the elk and was tracking the elk and ended up from that spot. It's like miles and miles down this huge canyon, and then miles and miles up this other side of this. Man, that was a huge boom. A big shaking boom. But anyway, and he was supposedly found on the other side, and as a crow flies, it was miles across, but it was just like huge, huge canyon. And he was found stuffed in a ball inside of a knothole in an oak. And I don't know if that's true or not.
Wow. Okay, Christine has a question about your childhood. What do you think was the reason for the visit with the aliens?
Just looking back and like my gut feeling, man, I don't know. It seemed like they had me and the Bigfoot there. I didn't get probed that I know of or anything like that. No harm. I don't have no like trauma
Implants.
or anything like that. Yeah, no implants that I know of or anything like that. I honestly don't know. I did, but one sister, she's like, that was a demon. That was a demon. I'm like, well, demons want to scare you. This, I had no fear. It was just like I said, being in a room with people, like looking with you, but just me sitting here watching you guys talk and not being involved.
Yeah. You didn't find any coconut oil residue, did you?
Well, that later when Bama showed up.
Bama was holding the hands of the praying mantis.
He was over there rubbing oil on it.
Okay. Kurt Seltzer asked, when you went back to get your camper, was it damaged or have any handprints or anything like that on it?
That's a good question too. And I did look, and I looked for tracks around it too, along the edge of the gravel road and like in the duff along the flat and stuff. And we didn't find anything. And I wonder if it was because I had left a trail camera off to the side on my camper. So if someone stole something, and I said, "Smile, you're on camera." I left that little thing on my camper door. And so just thinking if somebody's going to steal something, that maybe I could get their license plate or something. But maybe that had something to do with it. I have no idea.
Okay.
You seem to not like cameras.
Mm-hmm.
Trail cams. So tell them about the stump.
So the last thing that happened up there in that spot, this was 2020, August. We're bow hunting up there again. And I think we just did a day hunt, drove up there. Yeah. We'd left from the house and just drove up in there. And she was driving, and we got like a big, tall Chevy truck and stuff. And And I'm looking off down to the right, and we're going up this kind of steep road, and it comes to a point where there's like another road that kind of dies off, and it's kind of a deep draw that drops off right there. And I kind of see something that looked out of place. So I'm like, hold on, baby, back up a little bit. So she backed up a little bit. I'm like, that's weird. It's a skeleton. And so I get my binoculars, I have brand new Vortex binoculars and stuff. And I mean, we're talking, this is like 30 feet from me. So I start looking, and I'm like, it's an elk skeleton, like a whole skeleton. And I'm like, wait a minute, there's another one and another one and another one. And there was like 4 or 5 of them laying right close together, kind of like up under the ferns. But you could see full size, full, all the bones were there, and they were all attached, but they were just like they were boned out. And I was thinking, well, you couldn't throw them off the road that far, whole skeleton. But they're all. I mean, why would there be so many in one little spot? And then there was also like a hide of one that looked kind of like it was rolled up, kind of, it was white, like almost half decomposed hide. And then the other one, so I'm sitting there looking out the window, and I look down, and right below me, there's what looks like this big old growth red stump, like a rotted stump, probably 6 feet around, 4 to 6 feet around, and maybe 4 to 6 feet high or something like that. It's hard to judge in the ferns and stuff, but it was, you could see it. And there was one of those skeletons was draped over it. And I was like, babe, look at that. Why is there a skeleton? Bears don't drag a skeleton up on top of a stump to be open. They're going to drag it down somewhere in the brush or something. So we were sitting there trying to figure out what was going on. And the truck was still running. And all of a sudden we just heard just this loud knock right below where all those skeletons were. I mean, like 40 or 50 feet from our truck. And we look at each other, and I was like, kill the truck. So she shut the truck off, and we're looking off down there. It was like 5 seconds later, bam, same spot. And so we're like, we're sick of this place. we're not coming back up here again. That's what we, because it's in the same area. And so we leave, and sure enough, like a week later, my sister Cindy, she's like, I want to go see. We're like, all right, we'll go drive up there. And we get up there and pull up the same spot, and the skeletons are all gone, the hide's gone, and this is weird. And I've talked to the guys like Cliff and the guy that was at the North American Bigfoot Center
Museum.
where we just went to, and they said this. He before I could even finish my story, he goes, when you went back up there, was the stump gone? And I was like, yeah. He goes, there's no stump. And I said, nope. And I was looking at it with my binoculars from like 30 feet in the ferns. I mean, just clear as day, unobstructed. And went back up there, and there was no skeletons, no hide, and no stump there. And I just got like this dumbfounded look. I was like, well, I can't explain that.
Wow.
So I don't know what that was.
Okay, we got one last question from the chat room. And this goes back to when you were a kid. And Kurt Seltzer asked, did you ever go back and talk to the family that was feeding the Bigfoot off the porch?
I never did talk to them. I seen Yvonne was like the mom, and she was kind of not elderly. She's probably in her 50s or 60s or something then. I guess that's getting old. I'm that age now. That's getting pretty old.
Yeah.
But I seen her later on, and just we said hi and stuff. But I never did go back. I did drive her up there and show her where I was raised and stuff. That's where I kind of grew up in there and stuff. But they had long moved from there. I have no idea where they had moved to or anything, but there was some other people living in that spot. And the deck's really tall. It's just like on the side of a mountain, and the deck's out over it. So, and me and my brother would go down there all the time. They had a mentally slow guy that was there and a mentally slow girl, and they were married together. Kind of, they act like they didn't like each other, but they were married. But me and my younger brother, he was like our age in our mentality, even though he was like in his 20s or 30s at the time. And we would just hang out and play video games and just go walk around, just doing what boys do in the woods and stuff. And
Interesting.
but that's why we'd be down there all the time. And she was like, well, I'm going to tell you something. She goes, we feed family of Bigfoots right off the deck right there every night. And me and my brother kind of look and like, what? They're like, yeah, every night they'll take it from our hand. And we're just kind of like, oh, well, that's weird. We didn't say that. We're like, oh, well, just kind of went with it. Then we tell my mom, and she was like, man, I just don't know if, any of them are all there or whatever. Maybe they're seeing stuff, but maybe they were right.
Did they say what they were feeding the Bigfoot?
I don't recall what they said.
Huh.
That's a good question.
That is a good question.
Well, Scott, I can't believe how fast this hour and 45 minutes has gone by.
And you didn't even have to talk that much. I felt like
I like it. I'm going to
I felt like I was talking. I was talking more than you tonight.
Yeah, I'm going to fire Larry. I like that.
Poor Larry.
But
Well, he
have
can
you
ask
got
the questions. He can ask the questions from Chad. He's pretty good at that.
Yeah, it is.
But do you have any final questions, thoughts, or anything for the Blalacks?
You know, that's a lot to unpack. You know, there's a lot. I'm sure,
Yeah.
David, as you've experienced this, and Dede, as you've been brought into this, also. I mean, you ended up saying some things that most other people that run into these situations say is like, well, we can't explain it. Some things just don't add up.
We definitely didn't ask for none of them. That's the truth. Everything.
Yeah.
It wasn't like we went looking. We wasn't researching. We were just doing our thing, and it was like dumped in your face.
Right. And it's looking at a stump 30 feet away through your binoculars. Your mind makes out what it thinks is there. When you're used to
It
things
looked like
that are there.
red, like it was kind of broke up. Like a rotten, like a big Douglas fir stump or something. It kind of gets that dark, rotty wood, like the red and the dark look to it.
Right.
I'm looking at the skeleton on the stump, but I'm like, there's a skeleton on the stump, so I can't explain it. I don't know.
All right. Yeah. So, I mean, you guys are still going up there. You're still in an area where, you might run into these things, but it's interesting that after being up there for so long that, just with recently, things have started to kind of happen. And that's why I kind of asked about those fires too, is thinking maybe pushed into that area, and maybe, the elk also kind of being pushed out of the area or something like that. So I don't know, but it could be, like could be just be the new predator in town too.
Yeah, could be.
But definitely after hearing your teasers and chat, it definitely lived up to all the anticipation, that's for sure, as far as the different types of experiences you've had, and especially that one, with the pantry, and you turn in the door handle, and as soon as the click happens, the heavy footsteps run away. Yeah. That I couldn't imagine what that would have been like. How old were you when that happened?
I think I was about 8 or 9.
Oh man!
And I could just feel it, boom, 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 boom.
Wow.
Yeah.
But I mean, thanks for coming on, and thanks for finally, feeling comfortable enough to share everything with us. Because I know that, that story right there is a detail and something that I haven't heard, and I've heard a bunch of different stories about, these creatures being up underneath mobile homes, knocking on pipes, stuff like that, hitting on floors, things like that. But haven't heard anything to where tearing out the side of the wall to get to the cookies.
And feeling
it. but thanks for sharing.
You're welcome. It was hard. I spit the stuff out and to go in front of the camera and stuff. It really.
Oh, you did fine.
It was difficult, but Mark, you did make me feel comfortable. You said you were gonna, so I appreciate that. And you too, Scott.
Cool. Appreciate it. I'm glad you guys felt that way. And Mark, thanks for letting me jump in here and take over with pinch hit for Larry. I appreciate that too.
Yeah, we'll see you again next week.
Absolutely.
And if you want to go on Beast of the Woods Monday night, you can have my spot.
Well, we'll see. We'll have to get LP2's input on that approval. Have to get the big guy to approve that. That's his show.
Well, David and Dede, we appreciate so much, and we'd like to give you this opportunity for any final words that you would like to leave with our audience.
Well, I just wanted to say that for anybody out there in chat room or listening or that does listen, if you have a story, it takes guts to do it, but you're with the best group out there, and to just get the guts out and just spread the word and get the knowledge out there. And we're all wanting to hear each other's experiences and thoughts and ideas and stories and encounters. And I know there's got to be a lot more out there that's they're not saying, but hopefully, that
This will
maybe
help
not
them.
us give them courage, but just, seeing that we were not real eager to do it either, but we're so glad we did. And it feels good to get it off your chest and to actually say it. And hopefully it helps somebody somehow.
Well, we thank you again for coming
Absolutely.
on. You're such good friends of us in the channel and support us. We've been watching you drink out of the Beast TV coffee mug,
And my
you
sugar.
held up the T-shirt. And
I got a Beast TV on. It's really warm.
And-
Well, hopefully we can hook up and do an outing or a get together, meet and greet and stuff. That's really our goal, is to camp out with you guys and live it up.
yeah, we would love to have you. So with that said, I guess we will see y'all again. Same bat time, same bat channel. Night, night, footers. Beast TV would like to welcome all of our new Facebook members. Be sure to check out our pictures and videos of possible evidence. And if you haven't checked out the Files tab, there is a wealth of information that you may find beneficial. If you would like to support Beast TV, check out our gear. We have coffee mugs, face masks, gaiters, shirts, and tank tops. The link is pinned at the top of the comment section. Everything is always marked down 20%, so come check out our junk. We want to thank all of our new subscribers and our faithful followers. Also, be sure to check out our field evidence videos and our sister channel, Beast of the Woods. That's Larry's channel. If you want to help us out, make sure that you are subscribed. Click the thumbs up button, ring the bell, and leave us a comment. We would love to hear from you. Thanks again to each of you for watching, and we will see you again. Same bat time, same bat channel. Night, night, footers.
This has been a Sawdust production.